Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Oman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's video, we're going to be talking a little bit of buy planning strategy. I'm recording this around lunchtime on TLT day, so TLT is only in a few hours, but I thought I'd record this video because hopefully it still is useful if you're umming and ahhing about a few 50-50 decisions. Maybe the bias can be a factor to swing your decision to another player. So I wanted to give you some of my thoughts around the buys, how I'm looking to navigate them, and maybe some tips and strategies that you guys can also employ when setting up your round one team. If you guys enjoy the video, do give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing as well to see more content, and let's get straight into it. So I'm sure that all of you are watching are familiar that the Dolphins are now a new team in the NRL. So that's 17 teams. What that means is that one team each week will have a bye, and that's obviously going to throw in a lot of kind of, not necessarily surprises, but just a lot of planning and additional strategy to be able to kind of navigate those bye periods. Another thing to also mention just for the early part of the season, so teams like the Dragons, Manly and the Panthers, they've got their buys in rounds 1, 2 and 3 respectively. What that means is that their price change won't happen until after round 4, so that is something to factor into your planning if you're targeting teams with a good early draw, or maybe you're going all in on the Panthers, or let's say maybe you're not starting with Nathan Cleary and you're hoping for a price drop in round 4. That's not going to happen because he only would have played 2 games up until the round 4 price change period, and so that's something to keep in mind with your planning with your trades. Teams like the Dragons, Manly and Panthers, their players won't change in price until round 4. So this graphic that I've got on screen here is basically listing out every team's first buy that they've got, included a bit of a color shading as well, just to kind of recognize the teams that are probably more ideal in that their first buy is not for a long way away, and then versus the teams that do have that early buy. Unfortunately, what we have is a lot of the better teams do have buys earlier on in the season. So for example, teams like Panthers, Roosters, Sharks, Melbourne, and even Manly to an extent, they've all got a buy in the first kind of 8 to 9 weeks of the season. But you do have some good teams like the Rabbitohs, the Broncos, the Cowboys and Parramatta. They don't have their first buy until kind of, after maybe say 3 months into the season. So you've kind of got a good long extended period with some of those teams. So what I want to show here is just a kind of list of players just from every team that you may be considering. And so the way that I've tried to think about this now when I'm just trying to refine my team is if I'm really kind of in a 50-50 decision between 2 players, looking at this might be the way that I kind of opt to maybe go for a different player. So for example, I know it's not quite a 50-50, but a lot of people are looking at, say, Cam Murray versus Dave Fifita. I'm kind of in that dilemma at the moment. At the moment, I've got Fifita, but that's more of a budget thing. But if I had the budget to go up to Cam Murray, objectively, Murray probably is going to be a better Supercoach prospect. The benefit with Murray as well is that the Rabbitohs' first buy is not until round 16. You've got a full clear runway up until basically State of Origin, which is in round 13, where you can hold Cam Murray. Someone like Dave Fifita, on the other hand, though, he's got to buy quite early on in round 5. So especially if you're looking at that gun second or forward position as a longer term hold, maybe Murray is the better option because you just know you're going to get one extra game out of him, obviously notwithstanding any potential injuries. In comparison to someone like a Dave Fifita, if you think that they're going to average similarly around 70 points, Murray's going to get an extra 70 points on Fifita, which is pretty crucial when you start adding that up with a variety of, other players in your squad. And that's one way you could look at this buy schedule as a way to kind of make your decision in a 50-50. And so what I also want to call out here is that a few teams that won't have a buy until the first State of Origin game, which is around round 13. So those are probably teams that you can target maybe good long-term holds. That would be teams like the Bulldogs, Parramatta, Cowboys, and then the Rabbitohs, and then also the Broncos. Cowboys definitely sticks out because not only do they have a buy quite late on, but they do have a really, really good draw to start. This is something I've actually just thought about in the last couple of days as I'm someone who doesn't own Ruben Cotter at the moment. I'm thinking maybe with Fifita, if I'm starting to get a little bit of cold feet on him, do I use that money and pump that in instead to someone like a Ruben Cotter? If I expect that they're going to average similarly, I just know that Cotter's going to have more games under his belt until that first buy period in comparison to someone like a Fifita. So that is something that I'm starting to think about more and more. And I'm also thinking more heavily in terms of, getting Cam Murray, who I've already alluded to. A team like the Bulldogs, I know we were very keen on someone like Matt Burton. His interest has kind of cooled off a bit, but it is worth noting that, Burton should be a good long-term hold until the State of Origin period, where I'd expect him to be involved in the New South Wales squad in some aspect. Obviously, unless someone like Turbo plays in the centres, then Burton actually might be available during the Origin period. Someone like Parramatta, not targeting them too much at the beginning of the season, given that the first 6 weeks is quite tough. But, someone like a Dylan Brown, a Mitchell Moses, Sean Lane when he's back from his injury, Hopgood, I think is almost close to a must in your teams. These are good picks in the sense that when you do pick them up, even in say round 7 when the draw opens up, you're still going to get another kind of 6-ish weeks out of them before they hit their first buy. We will talk a little bit more about Parramatta later in the video because they are quite a good team to target during the specific bye period, but they don't have their first bye until round 14. So that is something that's pretty good. I've circled in red a few of those teams that have quite the early bye that we're probably looking at players from. So, the likes of Panthers, Roosters, Manly, Titans, and Sharks, and even the Tigers as well. So, someone like Adam Dewey, Tommy Talau, maybe you're taking a punt on a Sean Bloor or a John Bateman. There's a few picks in those teams as well that people are considering. The way that I'm kind of thinking about it is that I don't want to overload and overcommit, I think, on those teams. And I think I want to try to balance maybe 2, maybe 3 max players from some of these teams that I've circled in red, just to make sure that I'm not overexposed to buys in the early parts of the season, which is quite important in terms of money making trades to try to jump on players who are going up in price. And so I think you don't want to then also be additionally burning trades to try to manage your team with buys on top of that early part of the season, because this is the part where we know the least. We're going to need trades to kind of fix up areas in our team. Trying to manage buys at the same time is going to be difficult. So whilst I think someone like the Roosters are great to target at the beginning because of a great Dolphins matchup, I'm not wanting to overcommit. For me, maximum 3 is what I'd go for. Maybe, James Tedesco, Brandon Smith, and maybe a Sam Walker if there are some ongoing doubts with Nicho Hynes. Panthers, similar boat. Nathan Cleary, Brian To'o, and maybe a cheapy centre wing like a Taruva or a McLean, whichever one of them gets the spot that I'll find out at 4 o'clock today. I don't want to overcommit more than that, to be honest. So that's the reason why someone like Luke Garner, for me, I'm probably not interested now for the beginning of the season, and he'll be someone I'll look to target maybe from round 4 onwards. So that's the kind of mindset or thinking that I'm having with some of these early teams, and I think that's probably something I'd also recommend, just not to overcommit. And it also helps inform some of the guns that I'm thinking about. Maybe someone like a Harry Grant, for example, doesn't have a buy until round 9, so I know he's a good kind of medium-term hold until the first bye period. So Melbourne, I don't mind going in on a few extra players, and maybe getting Cam Munster, for example, if Nicho Hynes is out and you want to use Nicho Hynes money to fund Cam Munster. Maybe taking a punt on a mid-ranger like an Eli Katoa, Harry Grant, maybe if you want to go for a back and Will Warbrick as well, who's quite popular. I'm a little bit more comfortable doing that because I know that their first buy is not until round 9. So these are some of the thoughts that I've got in mind. And obviously, if you can pair that up with a good draw, that's where things work out really well. So that's why a team like the Cowboys really, really good, I think, to target from a buy planning perspective, but also just to capitalize on a good draw. Someone like Melbourne's not too bad as well. Newcastle, I know that they're a little bit up and down and it's a bit hard to predict how they're going to go, but if you've got faith in them, like maybe you're taking a chance on a pod and like, do I want to go Greg Marzu or do I want to go Ronaldo Mulatalo? If you're real 50-50, maybe you take the bet on Marzu just because he's got a later buy. And this also works when you're looking at someone like a Selwyn Cobbo, for example, maybe a Katoni Staggs. You can take a punt on them knowing that at least you've got a pretty good long-term vision of them being in your team without a buy. So this is some of the thoughts that I'd just be thinking about when you're looking at kind of building your round 1 squad. So what I've done on this slide is summarize for every team what are their 3 main buys during the course of the season. It's probably a little bit hard to decipher this given that it looks like just a bundle of numbers. So what I've tried to do is to make it a little bit easier to understand is I've highlighted the teams that in red that have 2 buys during this major bye week period. This is where you're probably going to have teams that it's going to be a little bit harder to hold their assets, just knowing that there's going to be kind of 2 of that kind of say a 6 to 7 week period where they've got major buys. And this is maybe where you can look to kind of come off some of those teams. So looking at those teams, you've got the Broncos, Titans, Melbourne, Panthers, and the Roosters. So again, quite a few good teams in that mix there. So really, I think what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of people who have got a lot of those origin guns, Grant, Munster, Tedesco, Cleary. I think they're all going to be kind of held up until the state of origin period. But at that point, it's going to be quite difficult to actually hold on to these players, I think, during this middle course of the season. Just knowing that they're going to be away with origin and rep duties, potential managing of injuries and rests, plus these additional buys for their team. I think we're really going to see a strategy where the middle part of the season, we're really going to have to rely on other teams, potential mid-ranges. And I think this is going to be helpful knowing that after the first 12, 13 weeks of the season, we'll have a pretty good grasp, I think, of who are the good teams and the good picks. So that will obviously make it easier for us, but this is something that is worthwhile to think about. I think during the middle part of the season, we're not going to be relying as much on our kind of top guns that we may have been in previous seasons. And looking at this analysis really kind of helped me think about that. So this is why I'm kind of thinking maybe it's good to take a chance or try to fit in more guns now at the beginning of the season with the knowledge that I'm going to have to try to get the points now, trying to get off them as well during the middle part of the season, because it's going to be quite difficult, I think, to own a lot of these guys during this period. One team I did want to highlight, though, is Parramatta. So the good thing about Parramatta is that none of their 3 buys actually occur in any of the major bye weeks, which are in round 13, 16, and 19. Parramatta's buys are in 14, 18, and 27. So they're going to be really good cover during those kind of main bye weeks. So this is why I think guys like Dylan Brown, who's a Kiwi, not going to play State of Origin, maybe someone like a Sean Lane, maybe someone like a Mitch Moses if he's not playing Origin. I really do think we're going to lean on Parramatta during this middle part of the season. So I think this is, again, something that you want to maybe think about is, let's say hypothetically, you're on a 50-50 of Ryan Madison versus Isaiah Yeo. Let's make that up. Obviously, that's a bit more of an easier circumstance, I think, to argue. You've got Isaiah Yeo, who's got the Panthers with 2 major bye weeks, plus he's playing State of Origin, versus someone like a Ryan Madison, who may not play Origin. I know he did last year, but he should be good cover during that bye week period if he's not playing Origin. That's the kind of decision making or thought process, I say, that you should be going through, I think, during this middle part of the season. Understanding, obviously, that this is quite later on in the season, and we'll definitely get to this, I think, at the time. But I just wanted to kind of quickly mention it and talk about it. Maybe more for your round one considerations. If there's any 50-50s, maybe you can refer to this. But I really do think Parramatta are going to be a team that we will look to target, I think, during the middle end of the season. And also probably what is worth noting as well is that some of those teams that have got buys late in the season are going to be quite difficult to manage as well, given that that's going to be the run home, maybe in head-to-head finals. So I'm looking at teams like Parramatta are obviously a bit of a challenge in that point, because round 27 they've got a bye, but a team like the Rabbitohs, they've got one in round 26, Broncos in round 25, Cowboys again in round 24. So a lot of those good teams that we may want to kind of stack the guns with, they're going to have buys later on in the season. So this issue is not going to go away. I think it just means that you just try to maybe want to diversify a team as much as you can, maybe not overcommit to a squad, and just be very mindful of the buys that are coming up, let's say in the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks. It will just help you kind of in those small 50-50s about picking a player. If, for example, you really can't split them, the buys, I think, should be the way that you should kind of make that judgment call, because I think they're really going to be influential for the rest of the season. Well, that's it, guys. Just a few thoughts and tips from me on buy planning. Understand it's probably not going to be a super long and comprehensive video, but I didn't want to get too much into it, just given that we're so early on in the season. There's so much that will shake out with the season. I just wanted to kind of maybe quickly give you some of my initial thoughts on how maybe you're looking at the buys and kind of planning around them. So if you guys enjoy the video, really do appreciate a thumbs up. Do leave any feedback or comments in the comment section below. Do consider subscribing as well. Going to be lots of content this week as well on the channel. We're going to do the round one preview, going to do a final team reveal. I'm going to go through a cheapy video, all that before lockout on Thursday. So definitely hit the subscribe button to see all of that. See you all in the next video.